Today it's mashup time, and I'm gonna mash together a bunch of stencil videos. Some are from many years ago, and I see how my audio has improved, by the way. But we're gonna mash them all together, and you're gonna see 25, 30 different techniques on how you can use your stencils. They're inexpensive, they're easy to store, they're a staple in your craft room, and I know you have them. So let's mash things up and get things done. Stencils. I have so many stencils. Let me show you. Look at all these stencils I have. Pull out your stencils and let's have some fun playing with stencils.
All right, so first up, let's do some heat embossing. I use the Wow embossing ink pad. I'm going to grab some scratch paper here, and then I'm just basically going to ink up my stencil. So I've got my stencil laid there, and then I'm just pressing, smushing, jigging, whatever you want to call it, my embossing pad through the stencil, making sure that the ink gets through all those little upside down triangles. All right, so that's the first one. Can't see diddly squat because it's clear ink. Then I flipped it over. I flipped the stencil over that had all the ink on it, and then I'm just pressing it. So I'm going to get a little twofer here. So you want to flip the stencil over, use the stencil side that has all the ink on it, and press it through. And we're going to see what happens because you can't see squat. It's white. It's clear on white. So I'm going to hope it goes through. Then I'm going to take on some embossing powder here, also from Wow, and I'm just pouring it on there, and then magic. What looked like a white piece of cardstock is white no more. So obviously there's a complete difference in the two. One is very light and ghost-like, and one is very heavy because we pressed the ink through the stencil to fill in the triangles, and then we stamped with it, and we got the nice subtle outline. So here's a look at the card I made from the first one where I filled in where I basically pressed the ink pad through the stencil. So now I have this very light one, very, very subtle, and I'm going to do some ink blending. Anytime you do ink blending and over a heat embossed image, the heat embossed image is going to resist the ink. So whatever color you heat emboss, blue, black, purple, green, whatever, it's going to stay that color as long as you're using a water soluble ink pad. All right. So here I am just doing basic blending. I got a little pink on there, and then I'm going to go in and add a little yellow to the center. Excuse my bobbing around here. I was pretty heavy handed with my blending. And it's kind of going to create a little grungy look. These inks are water reactive, so they give little water droplets. And here's a look at this finished card here. A little grungy for my style, but I do like it. The images I pulled from my magic mug, which I will do a dedicated video on later. Next up is embossing or letterpress. We're going to be using our embossing machine to do dry embossing. So I'm going to ink up the stencil here with the same color Catherine Puller ink I used before, which is called Sparkling Berry. And we're basically going to press this into your cardstock. So I'm using a Cuttlebug. It's very old, very loved. I love it. It has my kid's marker all over it. I'm never going to remove it because I love the marker. And I'm using whatever sandwich you would use for embossing, like dry embossing for your machine. But then I'm going to run it through, and it's basically going to press that image into the paper, but since we inked up the stencil, it's going to press the image into the paper, but also the ink into the paper. And you get this little letterpress look here. And here's a look at my finished card here. I just think it's so pretty. I'll show all these cards again at the end of the video. Again, I used die cuts, pre-stamped, and colored die cuts from my magic mug to pull this card together. Okay, another thing you can do is stamping. This stencil, I already pressed two different ink colors directly onto the stencil, and then I'm just taking my card panel. I'm just using a piece of copy paper here to keep ink from getting all over my fingers and just basically transferring it. It's basically like I'm stamping with that stencil. So you can really get this light, like speckly look. It's kind of cool. Just all the little speckles from the image, but it still pulls the design of the stencil out, and that high is a big die cut from my magic mug. Again, I will post a video link below. It's a time-saving hack video, but that talks about my magic mug in it as well if you want to know now before I have a chance to make my video. Now, using the same ink, I did nothing to it. It's the same stencil. I'm just going to mist a little bit of water over it, and then I'm going to stamp that stencil directly into my card. Wait till you see the difference that just spraying a very little bit of water will do. This is regular cardstock, by the way, not watercolored cardstock. Before you move the stencil, you can also add a little bit of ink blending to it if you want. Totally optional. I just wanted to show you different ways. So you're actually doing another technique with your stencil, doing partial stenciling. And there you just got this really cool shading inside those triangles. And you can peel it, but you can always line up your stencil. It's very easy to line up your stencil and continue to add ink or whatever. This actually turned out to be one of my favorite cards. Love it. And how cute are those little peeking pets up at the top? So cute. They're going, hi, see you. All right, double inking or kissing. This is my way of kissing stencils together. So what I'm doing is just blending ink right through that same stencil we've used the entire video. Don't worry, I'm going to bring one more. I just wanted to show you different techniques you could use with the same stencil so you can really see how to stretch the supplies that you already have. No need to go out and buy a whole bunch more. If you have a Cricut machine, I have a video on how to make your own stencils with the Cricut machine. I'll link that in the description below too. So that's just a very soft ink blended look through that stencil. See? Just like so. At this point, I'm going to tape it down so I don't have any shifting. And then I'm going to layer another stencil on top. And then I'm going to do more ink blending through it. And this is my way of kissing the two stencils together. Now I'm only going to partially ink this up. I'm using a darker color. So start with your light color for your first base, and then for whatever stencil you're going to kiss together or add over the top, you want it to be a little bit darker, so you'll pick it up. So I'm just adding a little bit here and there. I don't know, I might end up doing the whole thing for all I know, I can't remember. But it's easy to line up your stencils, which I appreciate. But I do think if you're going to do this and use two stencils, make sure you secure your bottom stencil down so it doesn't move all around. And then when you lift it up, you can see that very subtle image of that second stencil right through. So it's a really fun way to just add more bang to your stencils. So here again, heart, sentiment, all that was in my magic mug, and then I just flicked on some black paint. But wait, you can get a twofer, all right? Don't get rid of that. That is the ink. That is everything that was left on that stencil from that card. I misted it with water and I flipped it over and I'm pressing it down onto the card base. And then when you lift it up, look at this. Isn't this cool? I love it. Make sure you mist your stencil. Again, regular cardstock, not watercolor cardstock. Bada bang, bada boom. That's all I have to say. But wait, you can make another print while cleaning. All right, so that's all the leftover stuff on that stencil, all the ink that was left over. I am taking my dirty cleaning cloth that I've been using to clean my surface of all the ink, and I am just pressing it through that stencil, and look at what I got. It's such a dirty rag, I don't care, but look at what I got, right? And look, I turned it into a card. Can you believe it? Dirty rag. It's the surprises that you find yourself getting when you're cleaning. So here's all the backgrounds I made in this one video from this stencil, right? And here's all the cards I pulled together. Was one like, did one speak to you and say, yes, Laurel? Let me know if there's any other stencil techniques. Let me know what they are. I like to learn from you guys. Again, I'll link to the other stencil video I did, a dedicated video. I'll link to my time-saving hack video, which in it talks about my magic mug. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know what your favorite was, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
If you've ever been intimidated by layering stencils, or maybe you've used some layering stencils in the past and it just hasn't worked out for you, this class is going to be all for you. I'm going to make two different cards, but using the same exact layering stencil, the same exact ink colors. We're just going to change up one technique and you're going to get a totally different look. So I am going to be working off of the waffle flower grip mat here. Imagine what your stamps come like, a photopolymer stamp. It's a big, giant, solid photopolymer stamp with grid lines on it. And it keeps everything secure. It sticks to my work surface and it also will help everything stick to the top of the surface that I'm working with. Of course, you don't need this. You can work off of your desktop or your desk, your glass mat, whatever it is that you have that you work off of. The stencils that I'm going to use for today are called the Rose Duo stencils from the 10 stamps. They have 4 stencils in it total, and and it comes with a coordinating die. I just cannot get over how beautiful this stencil is, and you'll see firsthand. Now that little thing I have that's stuck on that grip mat, that's called the stencil extender. That basically protects the grip mat, so any ink that maybe goes around the edges will actually go on that plastic piece, which is easy to rinse off. So it's just basically a little added piece to make your inking easier. None of this is required for the technique. You just need a good layering stencil, some ink, and some blending brushes. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is ink up the base layer. Now I have 2 pieces of cardstock, so I'm going to do the same thing twice every single time. I have a regular white piece of cardstock, which is what I'm using now, and then I have a piece of watercolored cardstock. That's because we're going to do a different technique on the watercolored cardstock once we get these 2 designs laid down on the paper.
Let's talk ink for a second. Use whatever colored inks you have. My personal favorites are Catherine Pooler inks. I love them. The colors are beautiful. The party and spa lines are beautiful. You can do a lot of techniques with these inks. They're water reactive, which you'll see here in a bit. So those are the ink colors I'm working off of. So with layering stencils, you usually start with your lightest color first, and then you start building on the color. So for the first stencil, stencil 1, we're using a light color. So I chose to go with pink. You don't have to stick to the colors that I'm using. You can use whatever colors you want. If you are curious about the colors that I'm using, they will be linked in the supply list for you. All right, so I've got my first stencil down, so now it's time to move on to stencil number 2. I'll go ahead and keep that watercolor cardstock in place. I don't need to move it yet because we're just going to put the same design on both of them. So I will just line up the stencil. It's very easy to line up. You can tape your stencil down if you want. I'm not going to because I'm lazy, but if you want it more secure and in place, you can certainly tape it down. But once you get that lined up, you can go ahead and start blending your next color. So I chose to go with Garden Party, which is going to be the lightest shade of green that I'm doing here. So this particular stencil is just the leaves. We're not blending over the flower or anything. So this one was pretty easy to put down. Nothing special here. I'll go ahead and remove this piece of cardstock and pull in the other one and do the same thing. Now let's talk blending brushes while I'm doing some basic blending. I have many blending brushes. I have blending brushes from Amazon, Waffle Flower, Catherine Pooler, all kinds. I've got them all. And honestly, I love them all, but I'm perfectly fine with my Amazon brushes. They're very inexpensive. Like you get for $10, you get like 17 of them. So they work just fine for me. Use whatever you have that works for you. I feel like there are blending domes. Those are great. Little fingertip daubers. Those are great. Use what you got. All right, so moving on to stencil number 3. This actually has 2 elements. We're going to be doing the leaves and the flowers. So line it up, tape it down if you want to, and we'll go in with the next color, deepest color of green or whatever color it is that you choose. I'll be doing Lime Ricky for the leaves. Now, I had forgotten that there are flowers there too, so I got a little bit of the green on the pink. As you can see there on the top, don't worry about it. I'm going to keep rolling with it. I'm not going to worry about it in the least, and once we're finished with this, you won't be able to tell. So now I've got the color of the leaves down. I'm going to go in with Party Dress and go right over the top of that. And you pretty much know the drill. By the end of this, you can ink blend in your sleep. As you can see, I'm pulling out all different brands of ink blending brushes. I am not in favor of one particular one. I just use them all. They're all fine, honestly. So once you get the good amount of ink color down, now you can even be heavy-handed in the center and a little bit lighter when you're going around the edges of those flowers, and you can create some pretty shading. Look how pretty that is. I mean, can you even? I wouldn't be able to draw that. I certainly wouldn't be able to draw it. And I find lining up layering stamps are a lot more difficult than lining up a layering stencil. I don't know why, but it just is. And I am a huge fan of these layering stencils. She has an entire line of layering stencils with the coordinating die, and I own them all. Every single one of them. As soon as she started introducing dies to her layering stamps, I was sold. And these take up no room at all. So easy. All right, so go ahead and blink that. That's not a word. Well, that is a word, but that's not what I meant to say. Go ahead and blend till your heart's desire, and then we'll be ready to do our 4th and final layering stencil. This is coming together so easy, and I just can't believe how pretty these cards are going to be once you're done. And if you want to do more than 2, then by all means do more than 2. Have yourself a stack of cardstock and just go to town. And again, you can be wild and creative with your colors if you want to. You can do some unconventional colors. Totally and completely up to you. All right, so when we're on the final layering step of the stencil, these are when your darkest colors come into play. So I'm going to use my darkest green, and I'm actually going to do for the top of the flowers, it's a Merlot color. So I went into like the purple red family once we're done here. So really, I say play with it. right? Mix crazy colors together and see what happens with it. It's just paper. If you don't like it, you can either flip over the piece of paper and try a new design on the other side, or just get a new piece of cardstock. It's not a big deal. As you can see, I'm holding my stencil in place without any problems. But again, you can stick something heavy in the corner. If you got a coffee cup, use your coffee cup. Just don't, spill your coffee. Anything to hold it down if you want. Totally and completely up to you. Okay, once we're done here, let's lift that up and ooh, isn't that pretty? Now, of course, we have to do the same exact thing for the other piece of cardstock. So go ahead and do that down. I'm telling you, you'll be able to do all this in your sleep once you're done. And yeah, this is fantastic. I want to talk to you a little bit about my freebie while I'm doing this ink blending here. You're going to see a little sneak peek of it when we go to assemble the card, but I've got and created some beautiful handwritten digital sentiments, and I have created a download for you. It is an all occasion sentiment set, beautifully handwritten, and you can use them for whatever you want. You can print them on a laser printer and foil them, or you can just print them on a regular printer and cut them out. It's completely up to you, but that is what I am providing to you for free for just being here with me today. So all the details on how to get that freebie will be listed on my speaker page. All right, so here it is, done. The white one, we're putting off to the side for now. That's regular white cardstock. We're moving on. This is the watercolor cardstock. Now, this is completely optional. I want you to keep in mind. The inks that I used are water reactive inks. I stamped on watercolored paper so I could spritz the mess out of this with water and watch all of that move around. Now, I spritzed it a little too much, but I'm going to keep it in the video to show you how you can fix a mistake like that if you do. I love the look of watercolor. I think it's absolutely beautiful. The imperfection and looseness of watercolor just is amazing to me, and that's what we've just done here just by spraying it with water. There were a few puddles, so I just used a cloth and kind of pulled up those puddles, and now I'm going to go ahead and heat this with my heat tool and get it good and dry. When you heat with your heat tool, heat the front side of the paper and then the back side of the paper, and that will avoid warping. So I did lose a little bit of the definition of the petals on that bottom flower there. So what I'm going to do is just grab that stencil, that number 4 layering stencil, and I'll just line it up right over the top. And then using that same ink blending brush that I used at the beginning, not even adding any more ink to it, I'm just using whatever ink is left on that. I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more color, just a tad, not a lot, a little dab will do ya. And then it kind of put that back in. I've got this like shadow effect going on. I just love the look of it because it looks like I hand painted that, and I totally didn't. So let your paint dry also. If you're kind of on the fence about your design, let your paint dry, give it a good look, and then go from there. And if you find you don't like it, flip it over, do it again, or grab a new piece of paper. It's only paper, people. It's only paper. All right, so I like both of my designs. I'm quite happy with them. So now it's time to actually turn them into cards. All right, so let's work on this first panel here. This is obviously the watercolored panel here. I am also going to be using a sentiment and die set from the Ton Stamps as well. Has a coordinating die that goes with it. Lots of scripty fonts paired with other words that you can create phrases with. So I'm going to heat emboss this. I love the look of white sentiments on black cardstock. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to grab my Misty stamping tool, because anytime I stamp a sentiment without fail, I mess it up. So I use my stamping tool. I have to. Otherwise, I guarantee I'll mess up. Anytime I'm doing heat embossing, I need to prep my paper, and I'm going to prep it with an anti-static powder tool here. It just puts powder down, and that will keep your embossing powder from sticking to where you don't want it. So you can clearly see it goes down, it's white, and then you just brush it away with a clean cloth once you're done. So I'm going to flip my sentiment sideways here to make sure that I'm putting the stamp over where I just primed the paper. Then I'll close the hinged door of the Misty, and that will pick up the stamp. I am using white pigment ink. Anytime I do white heat embossing, it's white pigment ink with white embossing powder. So I'll go ahead and ink up my stamp with white pigment ink. The ink I'm using is from scrapbook.com. White pigment ink is fantastic. It's juicy. It goes on wet. Perfect for heat embossing. Now here's why I use the Misty. I put down a decent amount of ink. But for whatever reason, I didn't really get good coverage there in the middle. So this is when I told you I would mess up. Told you, nanny, nanny, boo, boo. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up again. And since I haven't moved the paper, I haven't moved the stamp, I can go ahead and stamp it again without any issues. And then I will get a perfect impression. This is like called double, triple, quadruple stamping, whatever you want to call it. I call it stamping it again because I messed up. So I've got my paper ready to go. Now, listen, sentiments. When you are heat embossing, super fine embossing powder. Say it with me. Super fine embossing powder. That is key for sentiments. The embossing powder is superly, that's probably not even a word, fine. It's grounded really fine and it works. It is perfect for sentiments. So I'm using Wow Superfine Embossing Powder. Then I'll go ahead and heat set it. That's not a word. Heat set it. Another tip for heat embossing is let your heat tool get heated up. Maybe let it just heat off to the side for a good 15 to 20 seconds. If you do that, your heat gun will be hotter, so it will melt your embossing powder faster, but also more evenly. And also go ahead and flip over your paper and heat it a little bit from the back side, and that will avoid any warping you may have. So as I mentioned, this stamp set comes with a coordinating die. So I'll go ahead, and it's so easy to line up. You can do it in your sleep. I'm grabbing tape. Another tip, lots of tips here. Take your tape and press it onto your skin, onto your clothes, onto your surface. You want to de-stick it a little bit. Otherwise, if you don't, you might find that as the tape goes through the machine, of course, it's a lot of pressure when you put it through your die cutting machine. So that is why you might find your tape tearing your paper after you die cut. So just remove some of the stick, press it wherever, clothes, face, hair. Don't put it in your hair. Don't put it in your hair. That would be bad. But I usually just press it to my skin, my hand, whatever, just to take a little bit of the stick away. And then I will go ahead and run this through my die cutting machine off screen. I use the Gemini Junior. It's plugged in. It's across the room, so I don't get that on camera, but that's what I did here. And this just die cuts like a dream. So now I have all these extra sentiments I can use for another time. But for this one, I'm going to use the congratulations sentiment. I am going to glue it down with my favorite glue of all time. If you know me, it's the only glue I use in my videos. It is the Barely Arts glue. It has a fine precision tip. I have had this glue for about 2.5 years now, and it has never clogged, not one single time. Goes on white and dries clear, and once it's dry, this baby's set. I like liquid glue because, see, that's a little crooked, so I'm like, no, I need to fix that. So I have a little bit of wiggle room when I glue this down, but once it's dry, that baby's set. It ain't going nowhere. Now, as you can see on that sentiment set, it also has some other sayings, quotes, phrases, so you can go ahead and build yourself up a little saying. So I grabbed a little image from the set. I'm going to ink that up, which is some black ink, and then just stamp it directly onto the card here. And I'm not using my MISTI, so I'm probably holding my breath as I stamp this, praying to God I get it straight. So it says, just a note to say congratulations. Boom! This card's almost done. We need to adhere it to a card panel. Okay, so this is a sneak of my freebie. Handwritten sentiments for all occasions. There's more than that, but you saw a little sneak right there. So I cut the congratulations off. I printed it on my printer and just cut it down. And here it is. I'm going to go ahead and build this up. But first I decided I needed a little something on the right-hand side because I had some ink, whatever. I don't know if my hand touched it or whatever, but I had some smeared ink up there. So rather than trying to erase it, I'm going to cover it up with some washi tape. If you don't have washi tape, use a marker, draw a couple of lines, whatever you want to do, or you could just trim the panel down smaller. So I'm just going to, this is just regular printer paper. This is nothing, no fancy paper here. Just printed my download that's available for free for you. And I'll go ahead and glue that down with the same glue I'm using. I'm just trying to get everything nice and straight with my mega scissors there. And look at that. Now you could pop that up with foam dimension if you want to, but I'm just doing everything flat, straight down, and we are good to go. You got to trim off the excess of that washi tape. You don't want that hanging off of your card. And then this panel is done. It's complete. If you wanted to add sequins or if you wanted to flick on some black paint or whatever, now's the time to do it. But I'm perfectly happy with how this looks, so it's time to put these onto some card bases. Now I pre-cut and score all of my card bases at one time. I do it about once a year. So I always have bases ready to go. So I just grabbed some red cardstock and I'm just gluing this down. Nothing special. For this card, I'm just gluing it directly on top right here, just like that. None of that red will be showing through whatsoever because I've already got that black and white washi tape over there to the right. For my other card, I'm going to let a little bit of the card base show through. So I'm just going to line it up a little bit differently on my card base there, and then I'll give myself a little red border, just like that. Trying to straighten it up as best I can, and then letting the glue do its thing. Another reason why I like that glue, that liquid glue, it gives me a little wiggle room because I didn't have it on straight at the first time. So once you're done with that, just flip it over, cut off any of the excess that you have hanging off the side there, and you are good to go. And we have done 2 cards here, same stencil. It's a 4-step layering stencil and just stunning. The recipients are going to love your projects. I'm telling you, layering stencils, it's where it's at. And if you can get one that has a coordinating die, even better. All right, so I'm going to be using the Waffle Flower grip mat today and the Waffle Flower stencil extender. This is just easier for me to use when I'm using stencils. And all of the stencils that I'm using are layering stencils, of course, but they also have coordinating dies, and they're all from the Ton Stamps. I find layering stencils are so stinking cool, and you can make so many cards in a very limited amount of time, which you know I'm all about simplifying. I'm a lazy crafter, so this is just amazing. So this particular one has 3 to 4 stencil layers. It's all, the Ton actually etches the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the stencil, which is nice in case you get them out of order as you're cleaning them off or whatever. And she also adds different, like she has her own ink line. I'm using all Catherine Puller inks, but her stencils also have etched like what is recommended, like what colors, whether you're using a mid-tone or a light color or whatever, all that's etched on her little stencils, which is cool. I haven't seen that. So anyway, I'm just going in and I just chose different colors of ink. You can see, let me talk to you about this grip mat. So the grip mat is actually very sticky, so it's stuck to my surface that I'm working on. Then I put my paper down in that little rectangle opening, so it keeps my stencil, I'm sorry, not my stencil, keeps my cardstock in place. And then I have my stencil. Now with the stencil, you can tape it down or whatever, but I'm just holding it in place, but that's a little risky. Sometimes I mess up. But we'll do a couple of different ways when we're ink blending. So anyway, we're just ink blending all these different colors, right? And look at this. When you lift it up high, that is stinking gorgeous and made in less than a minute. So to clean my stencils, I just rinse them off with water. It comes right off the ink, the Catherine Puller inks. If you're using archival ink, I wouldn't recommend it because that will stain your stencil. All right, so here I'm just using a little heavy magnet or whatever I had on my desk in place. You can hold it with your hand, add some tape, whatever, but everything's still the same. I've got my grip mat, my cardstock, and then my stencil. And I'm just choosing fun colors that work together. I always have a color wheel. I have this little pin board thing. What do you call those boards where you can, you know, push pin stuff in it? Whatever. Pin board is what I'm calling it. And I have that, my color wheel right in front of me, so I can always tell what colors go together just by glancing up at my color wheel. Now, this second stencil actually has the leaves in it, and lining up these stencils are very, very easy. If you have eyeballs, you can line up your stencil because it just, once you line it up, it just looks like it goes there. It's just meant to be. So here I am using some green, obviously, for my leaves. You could use blue, you could use purple, you could use whatever freaking color you want. It's your card. Go at it. All right, so this next level has actually the leaf stencil and the flower stencil. So this is pretty cool. So at this point, I'm getting these little finger dauber blending tools just so I don't go over the flower when I hit my leaves, these little things right here. Use whatever you have for your blending brushes. Heck, at this point, you can grab your Q-tips if you don't have anything really fine tipped right that for blending. And then I'll just go in with an orange. So we've got a yellow, then we've got an orange, and I'm just doing some blending. I have all different kinds of blending tools. My most favorite, honestly, are the cheap ones from Amazon. I'll link them in the supply list. All my supplies will be linked below in the description for you. And here's this finishing layer here, and I decided to go out with a bang because I'm going to use red. And you can see how I'm just lining up the stencil. I'm moving it around. I kept this in real time, moving it around, and when it looks like it's lined up, see how it's just perfect. It's perfect. This is lining up stencils for dummies. All right, so I'm going in with my cranberry fizz, and I'm going to go in. This is going to look like a hot mess when you blend over your stencils, but that's okay. It's super cool, easy to ink blend. You can mass produce all these babies at one time. This last stencil also has a little bit of the outline on the leaves, so I'm going in there. Again, use a Q-tip if you don't have a little fine dauber like this. And then check this out. Hi, you're so pretty. Wait till I show you how I turn this into a card. All right, so this time I'm not going to use the stencil extender. I had a bigger piece of paper, whatever. You can use these grip mats or not. I typically don't buy new things, but when I saw the grip mats and the stencil extender, I did go ahead and buy it, and I do like it. Keeps everything firm in place. So this is the last stencil I'm going to be ink blending through. You've seen me do it before, so I went ahead and sped this up. Clearly, I do not work this fast, if only. So if you get stencils that don't have it etched in there, the numbers like the ton does, you can just, write in the corner, which I do for my other layering stencils that don't come pre-labeled. I just write with a Sharpie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so I don't mess up my layering. So anyway, super easy, not a big deal. So I've gone ahead. This is the final layering. You can see how easy it is to line up. You just kind of push the stencil around until it looks right. It's really, it sounds ridiculous, but that's all I do. And then I'll go ahead and ink blend the final color. Ooh, I'm using this deep blue. I thought I was going to mess it up, but I didn't. It is so pretty. Wait till you see. Check this out. Hi, you're pretty. Look at those different colors. Now, all of these layering stencils have coordinating dies to come with them, which I think is brilliant. I remember when layering dies first came out, layering stencils first came out, they didn't have dies. So there's only so much you can do with them, but with dies, you can really do a lot, right? So go ahead and tape your die down. I have the Gemini Junior die cutting machine, which has that magnetic plate, but I still tape my dies down. Okay, there's no way around it. If I don't do it because I'm lazy, it messes up, and I mess up all the ink blending that I just did because it shifts during the machine. So go ahead, just take a couple seconds and tape it down, right? A tip with tape is go ahead and stick it on your skin a bunch of times to remove the stickiness. That will help you if you're using tape that tears your paper. Just press it on your skin a bunch of times to remove some of the stickiness. Lining up these dies is super easy. It's a no-brainer. Here's the one. Ooh, this card. I'm so excited about this card, and you haven't even seen it. And you guys, I've done all the work. The work is right here. The work is in the ink blending, and then, of course, die cutting. And then wait till you see this card. I keep talking about this card, and I haven't even shown it yet. So I went ahead and did it off screen. I just ran it through my Gemini Junior. It's a electric machine that's plugged in, so I don't bring it to my desk. I take my stuff to it. And it's just a button, you push it and it goes right through. So peeling off the die cuts is just easy peasy pumpkin squeezy. Check out all these beautiful flowers made in no time at all with layering stencils and dies. Hi, can't get any easier than that. So this card, look at it. It's so beautiful. So all I did is take a look at my color wheel, and blue sits across from the orange and the reds on the color wheel, so I knew it would go good together. So I chose that navy blue background, and it's just completely striking. I popped up that ink blended stencil die cut with some foam dimensional tape and added a sentiment strip that came out of my magic mug, and that card is beautiful and it is stunning. Stencils. They are so inexpensive and very fun to use. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a bunch of different ways you can use the same stencil. There's so much more than just ink blending through it or maybe putting a paste through it. So let's get into it, and I'm going to show you how you can make the most out of the stencils you already own. So first up, let's do some monoprinting. I am using some paint that I just purchased at Michael's. It's from Deco Art, so very inexpensive paint. And I am just trying to smear it on my glass surface. You can do it on some plastic packaging, a plate, anything will work for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and press my stencil down into that paint. Don't let it dry. Do it while it's wet. And then I grabbed a piece of cardstock, and I'm just going to press it through that stencil, but apply some good pressure here. All right. I'm using no blocks, no tools. I didn't want to use a brayer. I wanted to show you that you can do this without anything special. So here's the first lift that I got. And I think this is so cool. That thick, bubbly paint was awesome. But let's take a second print. So grab yourself some cardstock. I'm just grabbing anything. So now I've got red. I just grab whatever I could find. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. And we're going to see how many prints we can get just from doing that. So that's a thinner look. Super cool. I like it. Let's see if we can get a third print out of it. And I didn't know how many I would get. So this time I'm really pushing. I'm using the side of my hand to push to make sure I can pick up all that paint. So I got a really great third print. All right, so this time I'm going to pick up the stencil so I have that design left on my surface. And now I'm going to press the cardstock onto that surface. So the surface is actually acting like a gel plate. Then I pick it up. This was a little messy for me, but I actually turned it into a card, so hold on. And the last thing we're going to do is take what's left on that stencil, so that still has all the paint on it, and then I'll press my cardstock onto the stencil. And again, I didn't want to grab a brayer or anything. I wanted to show you that you can do all of this without any fancy tools. A brayer would have been easier, but I succeeded just fine. Just took a little extra pressing. And then here I got this monoprint, and I think it's so cool. So I actually turned these all into cards. Let's take a quick look here. So I love all of those prints that we got at the beginning. Just pressing it through that thick stencil with all that paint in it, and that stamping with the stencil or creating a monoprint with the stencil. So I got some really fun looks just by using a paint and a stencil. All right, next up is Stencil Resist. So that is some packaging I pulled out of the garbage just to keep me from having to clean up. And I'm taking my embossing pad and pressing it right onto the stencil. And then I'm basically going to use that stencil kind of like a stamp and create a resist using some embossing. So I went ahead and sprinkled on some embossing powder because I'm going to be doing heat embossing in a minute. And now I'm just pressing that stencil like a stamp with all that sticky ink on the side through to get onto my cardstock. Again, I used my trash to press all that through. I couldn't see a diddly wink thing, so I was hoping everything transferred fine. Now I'm sprinkling on some white embossing powder. You could use clear here, but I really wanted some crisp white lines. And I can see it sticking, so I knew my transfer was a success. Sometimes when you're doing white on white, it's just like a risk. But then when you add the ink or whatever it is that you're doing for the resist, it's like magic. So I'm going to use the shimmer powder. I haven't used it in quite some time. And it's just like this powder, and I kind of was trying to show you how shimmery it was if I blended it with my finger. But the magic is when you add water to it. So look at all these different colors that come alive. Now you could use color bursts or Bruchot or anything like that. These are shimmer powders from Nuvo. I've had them forever. If they're still available, I'll link them below. But I wanted, you can see that, you can see the stencil design coming through, but then I smushed it onto my surface and I lost all that cool color. Not to worry, I'll just add some more powder. And that's that. And when you add the powder to the wet, it's super cool. Look at all those different colors in that one little bottle of powder. So once I let that dry, I just adhered a die cut to it. And that is all I had to do. And I think that subtle background from the resist and then the boldness of those pigment powders, match made in heaven. Now, dry embossing or letterpress. So I am using a Cuttlebug. This is very old. It was the very first thing I ever bought. And I had to do some finagling to figure out what sandwich works for me. So you'll have to do that with whatever machine you use. But let me back up and show you again the sandwich that I used. So I have the big fat A plate, then a B plate, then 2 of those embossing folders, then my cardstock, then my stencil, and then my B plate. Make sure your stencil is on top of your cardstock. So cardstock, then stencil. And look at that. I did it again on another card too. My stencil was dirty, so I'm just kind of removing that with my fingernail. But anyway, look at that look. So you can have the raised side or the indented side, whatever floats your boat. And I just think you get some really cool results by just dry embossing with your stencils. So for these cards, again, everything came out of my Magic Mud, the die cuts and the images. The card to the left, I just used an ink pad and lightly went over the top of those raised edges to create a little shadow. And the one to the right, I just left it alone and added my die cuts. And look how cute these cards are. Next up is pastes. Now I'm using paste I have not opened in a long time, so I was very happy to see they were not dried out. This one I never even opened at all. So I took the handle of my my tool there and banged a little hole in it, but now I've got the paste all over the handle. So then it gets all over my hand. But anyway, you should just properly open your bottle before you don't just take the handle and bang a hole in it, because then you'll create a mess. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm using black cardstock because I really love these pastes on a dark surface. So I'm going in and I'm not going to go ahead and do the whole thing. So you can, this is almost another technique like partial stenciling. You don't always have to do the entire
look of the stencil. You can just do a little bit of it and get another cool look with your stencil. All right, so I went ahead and cleaned that off. I just rinsed it under warm water, and then I'm going to take what's left of that blue on the spatula and apply it through. Then I'm going to take a new spatula because I'm going to go in with yellow, and I didn't want to mess, I didn't want to add blue to the yellow jar. And I was thrilled to know that paste was still nice and liquidy, and I'm very happy because I swear I haven't opened this in like a year. So I thought if I mixed the two colors, I would get a green, because yellow and blue make green, but yeah, that didn't happen. So you're going to see my blue just disappear. That's all right. I didn't know. Everything I do in crafting is just trial and error. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? I don't know. So there's a look at that one. So I had to set it all to the side, and you got to let the pastes dry. So that's something to think about. I actually created these cards first, but I just moved it. I shifted it around in my video. Anyway, so here I am using the stencil. That's all the paste that's left on the stencil, and basically stamping with the stencil. So I flip the stencil over, pressed it down through the cardstock there, and then I get this cool look. It's kind of like a grungy look. It's not something I typically make, but when I added these images that I had already pre-cut and die cut and everything and put them in my magic mug, I really like that background now. So boom, and here's the rest of the cards I pulled together again with things I've already pre-cut out and pre-colored, put in my magic mug, so it makes for pulling together cards very, very easy. But all the pastes, baby. I love it. All right, sprays. So I'm using, this is a Nuvo spray, again, 1 spritz. It was 1 spritz, that's all, and check it out. But again, you still have all that spray left on your stencil. So go ahead and flip that stencil over and see if you can get a second print. Mine as well, you got to clean it anyway. That's from the garbage, that paper towel. Use your garbage. And you get these two, like, whatever, they're cool. So I made almost identical cards. You got a twofer, and you made it in about 7 seconds. I'm telling you, with sprays. If you don't have these kinds of sprays, you can create sprays with your ink refills just by using a water bottle and just add some ink and maybe a teeny tiny bit of water and try to spray it that way. Or you can do water flicks. There's an abundance of sprays out there, or you can make your own. I'm pretty sure I have a video on my channel on how I did that. But I wanted to show you why I love this stencil. It's super cool. It doesn't have a straight or flat edge around like a frame, so you can continue to line the stencil up and create as many patterns as you want. Let me show you again. See how I just was able to line that corner up and just carry out the stencil and just keep going. So if you're a scrapbooker or you want to create different colors or gradients, it's super easy to line that stencil up, and I just think it's cool. And here's a quick look at that card right there. So I made a ton of cards today, all using the one stencil, wonky triangles. I don't even know if I said the name of it. All the supplies I used, if they're available, they are linked in the description below. But again, I want you to use what you have. I don't want you to feel like you have to run out and buy things just to create cards. That's what my channel is all about. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any video requests, please leave them for me in the comments. I am starting to dry up on ideas and I need your help. So until next time, I hope you have a great week.
Well, hey there everyone, it's Laurelbeard. Today's video is all about stenciling techniques and very easy peasy stenciling techniques. A lot of us have stencils in our stash. Some of us even cut them with our Cricut. You can make them with your own dies. You can just run a die through maybe some stencil plastic or acetate and create your own stencils that way. So I thought this video would be fun to show you different techniques you can do with all those stencils you have to really stretch them and get your bang for your buck. So the first thing you can do is change up the design. Sometimes you can rotate your stencils or, I don't know, overlap them in different ways to create different backgrounds. In this instance, I'm just going to shift my stencil a teeny tiny bit, and I'm going to go in with the second color. The first color I put down was Juniper Mist from Catherine Puller. This is Pixie Dust. Real quick, take a moment and click on that subscribe button and click that notification bell. Thanks so much. And now I've just shifted the stencil over a tad. I'm going in with the pink or the Pixie Dust. It's kind of like a pink purple. And then blending a little bit on here. And then what this has done is almost created a little drop shadow effect of the sun rays. So I just think that's really cool. Kind of like, I don't know, geometric, but it just changed it up a little bit. Got a little shading, got a little something, something. So you can take a look at your stencils. I'm sure there's plenty of stencils that you have in your stash that you can do this with to create something really fun. Another thing I'm going to do is heat embossing. And I'm going to do this with this stencil from Altenew. It's actually a layering stencil. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm using purple tape to secure my stencil in place because sometimes I get a little heavy-handed when I do some ink blending and my stencil shifts out of place. So here I am again going in, doing ink blending just like I did before, right through that stencil. And all the colors and the supplies and everything I'm using are going to be linked below in the description for you in the visual supply list as always. So now I'm going to go in with my Wow embossing. Now you could use the pad, which is way easier, but I wanted to use this brush refill. This is a new to me product. It's the refill from the embossing, but it's in a brush format, so I can kind of brush it on. And doing this, I can put like thicker applications in certain places and thinner applications in certain places. So I just am doing this, but by all means, just take your embossing pad and smush it right onto the stencil. Don't move your stencil out of place. You want to smush it right over where it is. And then once that embossing ink is on there, I'm going to sprinkle on some clear embossing powder. I love it so much, I got the ginormous tub of it. And then I'm going to heat set that in clear. And what that's going to do is lock in your color. It's locked in. Nothing's going to change the color or anything. So if you wanted to do watercoloring or anything over that, you have now secured your design and your color underneath. So now I'm going in with this color. I think it's Pixie Dust again, and doing some ink blending. And it's a layering stencil. It was quite easy to line up. You just found the open space, stuck it there, and then did some ink blending. And now I've got this beautiful design. And the heat embossed image is actually shiny from the embossing powder, and it's also raised a little bit, so I have some texture. And then I took those beautiful present die from Catherine Pooler, and So Happy also from Catherine Pooler. They were in my magic mug, and adhered them to a card, and bada bang, bada boom. And now we've got mists or DIY mists. You can create your own mists with ink and water, ink refills and water. This is a mist I'm using from Altenew. It's called Mountain Mist, and I'm spraying it onto some black cardstock. And it's going to just, I'm spraying it. I'm being very heavy-handed. I don't think you can use too much mist, in my opinion. But we're going to get a twofer out of this one. So this is going to be another technique you can do with stencils, and that's stamping with your stencils. So I'm bringing in a piece of paper. I'm going to take that stencil that has all of that mist, all of that sprayed ink sitting on top, and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to stamp it right onto another piece of cardstock. I'm going to use a paper towel roll to roll to transfer the ink, just to keep my hands clean if it's possible. I'm sure my hands are pretty inky when I'm done with this video, but now you've got that. Two totally different looks, but with the same, at the same sitting, the same ink, the same spray, the same everything. So here's a look at this first card. I just used a die cut from the magic mug. And this look. I just love them both. There's no favorite. I just love them both. And again, those are dies that I previously cut and put in my magic mug. Again, everything's linked below for you. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a magic mug, check out here, the info at the top, right on the right-hand corner. All right, you can use pastes. Oh my God, this stuff, I could eat it. I could truly eat it. I love it. This is my favorite color. This is Glacier paste. It speaks to me. I want it. I want to wear it. But I'm not. I'm going to put it through stencil instead. So I am just icing a cake. I am icing a stencil, smearing that through, getting as much as I can on that stencil. I'm using the media spatula from Nuvo because I like it. It's flexible. You could probably go to a dollar store and get some of those in the kitchen section. Maybe you can get something like that, but I like the quality and the width of this particular stencil. And once that's dry, it's beautiful, it's shiny, it's sparkly. I had that die cut and flower in my magic mug, so I was able to just adhere those down, and bada bing, bada boom, you know it. You know it. So here I am again. This is some, what is this? What is this? What is this? This is from Gina K. This is a glitter paste. It's basically all glitter and glue, but I decided to mix it with the leftover Glacier paste that was on my spatula. So I got me a little custom something right here. So I didn't want to waste any of that Nuvo paste. So this is really black in hindsight, but because I mixed it with the Glacier paste, I got a really pretty color here. It's almost like it's translucent. I don't know. It's cool. I had to actually stop the video and think, because the word I was trying to think of, I just forgot it again. Oh my gosh. What's the word? What's the word? Holographic. Holographic. What is wrong with me? Get some more coffee. It's cool and holographic. And this is just a little bonus card I had. I did some sprays on the background, took a stencil, applied the black glitter gel from Gina K. I wanted to show you that it is indeed black, and it's cool and sparkly, and I love it, and that card was done. So lots of fun stencil techniques that you can use. Very easy. Stencils are inexpensive. If you don't have any, you can make your own with dies and just find some plastic or acetate to die cut with, and you can have a stencil that way. Use your cutting machine, whatever you've got for stencils, but I thought this was a very fun and quick video showing you different ways you can use those stencils.